This is the third year, I think, we've done the tradition of having people share their testimonies, a little 10-minute testimony at the beginning of each of our general sessions. And tonight, we have asked Carolyn Karlstrom, she's on our committee, and it's been a matter of conversation. I don't think this is the first year, but this is the year she's going to give it. And we're really blessed, Carolyn. Thank you so much for your willingness to share.
Thank you. I'm looking for a picture. Louise, when that picture goes up, I want not that picture, the other picture. I want to show you a picture of me just a few years ago, clinging precariously to the side of a sheer precipice from which I was slowly and inexorably slipping. I couldn't make it back up, over, and out on my own. I'd actually tried it a few times. I was doomed, and I knew I was doomed. Go ahead and put it back up for a moment. Yeah, anyway. It hadn't always been that way. For the first 30 years of my life or so, I remained tucked up safely in the fold. I was born into and raised in a Christian home, and in fact a Seventh-day Adventist home. I was active in my church. I was known in my family as being particularly religious, and really, truly, I did love Jesus. I was baptized at age 12, the same age most of my friends were doing the same. I did participate as a teenager in leadership roles in our youth Sabbath school classes and so on. I attended Walla Walla College, where I met a man who also was raised in a Seventh-day Adventist home, and we married. We maintained an Adventist home for many years, and we filled a number of church offices over time. And we actually even spent 3 years in the mission field. And then, well into our 30s, we lost our way, and we took a sharp turn off the pathway, and we headed toward the precipice. Now, we did not plan to get lost. We didn't try to get lost. We didn't mean to get lost, and we certainly didn't want to get lost. But like the lamb in Jesus' story, the lamb that you saw a moment ago in the picture, we did get lost by simply wandering off, just a teensy tiny step at a time. We began to compromise. That tuft of grass looked tasty to us, and it even looked safe. And then the tuft beyond that looked quite pleasant. And after that, we could see an entire meadow full of green grass, which looked good to us. And finally, we were so far away that, looking back, we couldn't even see the landmarks. They were invisible to us. And I looked back a few times. Couldn't see any way back. And it seemed an utterly hopeless matter to me. And there was finally the tumble right over the edge. This was my particular area of weakness and desire, my drug of choice, my idol. And make no mistake, this was an idol to me. It was like a drug to me. I was well and truly addicted. It was entertainment in all its forms. I'd always liked to read, but I'd always taken some care in my choice of reading material until I stopped doing so. I stopped thinking about what I was reading, worrying about the appropriateness of this or that, and began to just read whatever I wanted to read. It didn't take very long, of course, before that bled out into other areas. Pretty quickly, I was not very careful anymore with my choice of television programs and movies and theater events and music and so on. So one tiny step placed me nearer the next tiny step, which led to the tiny step out after that. And as I look back, I don't think of them anymore particularly in terms of tiny, but they certainly seemed inconsequential at the time. I couldn't see what was happening until all of a sudden I did see that something had happened and that I was a very long ways away. It did not take very long at all before I would and did read anything, watch anything, laugh and talk about anything, listen to anything, go just about anywhere. And it truly would be impossible for me to overstate my involvement and a desire for this self-indulgent use of my time and my energies and my resources. These activities really were about all I did. And there I was then, finally, hanging on to the edge of a cliff from which I was certainly going to fall eventually to my death. This was my sorry state for 17 years. There actually came a point when I felt okay with this. It seemed so hopeless to me. I couldn't see a way back, and I finally conceded the next life, decided that I would take what I could get. That would be this life alone. I shudder now at the thought of my resignation to my fate, but I, at that time, threw myself entirely into this self-gratification that I've described to you. Then Rick, my husband, woke up, and we praised the Lord for that. Now, his story is quite remarkable, and it involves allowing himself to be rescued from this sure destruction. He was hanging over the same cliff I was, but he managed to get lifted up and out and over without my even knowing it. That's how oblivious I was to what was going on in the lives of those around me, even those closest to me. That's how self-absorbed I was. And it was Rick who, on Thursday evening, the 27th of October, 2005, extended the invitation to me to attend church with him the next Sabbath. The miracles, and these miracles I'm referring to, are only the ones I began to actually notice, the ones I could see and hear and feel. I do not doubt that there were many miracles unknown to me through these years, and miracles that led me up to this point. But suddenly I began to see the Lord's hand working. The first one that became noticeable to me was I was impressed with this great gift that was being offered me. It occurred to me that I was very fortunate indeed to have a spouse who was committed to a return and was going to return whether or not I did. And he was going to go with or without me. And so I ultimately, and when I say ultimately, I'm talking about a 24-hour period of time here. He told me on a Thursday evening what had been happening in his life, and he informed me that he was returning to church, invited me to attend with him, and by Friday night it had been made very clear to me that if I were ever going to go back or try to go back, what better time would there be? This was a gift wrapped especially for me, I thought. However, having made these occasional looks back that I mentioned earlier, and even an odd attempt at a return without any lasting success, I have to tell you that it was with just a tiny sliver of hope that I actually attended the first time then the Vancouver Adventist Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I was going to, and these were the terms I thought in these terms, I was going to see what happened. And I went back, and I was met in the foyer by a bunch of warm and loving people who seemed absolutely delighted to have me. And we found that morning that there was a Revelation seminar starting that very night. Well, we attended. Toward the end of the second week of 3, I became aware that something had happened to me, that I had changed, and it actually was one of those from one moment to the next kind of experiences. I am astounded yet at the distinct time stoppage from one era to another, and I became aware that that there were some changes that had taken place in my life. I was a different person suddenly. So out went the books and the movies and the music. Into the garbage went tickets to theater events that we held and had purchased previous to this point of time that I'm describing to you. And it was with the getting rid of them that the desire for them stopped. I can tell you it was very difficult indeed for me to let go of those things. I let them go hanging on pretty desperately to them all the while. But when they were gone, and not a moment before, I suddenly found myself free of that desire and those compulsions, and so on. I told my friends what was going on. I wanted to retain my friendships with people, and I knew I couldn't suddenly be unavailable to them or stop taking their phone calls or with no explanation at all, stop accepting invitations to them to go here and do that and so on. So I explained what I could do and what I wouldn't be doing with them anymore and why. And this did go some way toward preventing misunderstandings and hurt feelings and so on with them. And I look back on that time as a time of highly mixed emotions. It was a very difficult time for Rick and I. It was a tumultuous time. The changes were so great in our lives. But we got through it. We were rebaptized on the 19th of November. And now, Louise, if you've got that picture, I can show you an updated picture. I was at one time a little black lamb hanging on a cliff from which I was going to fall. I became, on November 19 of 2005, a found and rescued lamb. I'd like to read you a poem that is a favorite of mine because it speaks so to my heart. And it's called The Little Lost Sheep by a woman named Ethel Brazelton. And here's how it goes. Poor little black sheep that strayed away got lost in the wind and rain. And the shepherd, he said, "Oh, hireling, go find my sheep again." And the hireling frowned. "Oh, shepherd, that sheep is black and bad." But the shepherd, he smiled like the little black sheep was the only lamb that he had. And he said, "Oh, hireling, hasten, for the wind and the rain are cold, and the little black sheep is lonesome so far out from the fold." And the hireling frowned. "Oh, shepherd, that sheep is old and gray." But the shepherd, he smiled like the little black sheep was fair as the break of day. And he said, "Oh, hireling, hasten. Lo, here is the 99. But there, way off from the sheepfold, is that little black sheep of mine." And the hireling frowned. "Oh, shepherd, the rest of the sheep are here?" But the shepherd, he smiled because the little black sheep, he held it most specially dear. Then the shepherd went out in the darkness, where the night was cold and bleak, and the little black sheep, he found it, and he laid it against his cheek. And the hireling frowned, "Oh, shepherd, don't bring that sheep to me." But the shepherd, he smiled, and he held it close, and that little black sheep was me. I wish to praise God and to thank him for persevering. He did not give up on me for an instant. He looked for me, and he looked out for me always. He never wanted any other than my safety and salvation. I will be grateful forever.